If you've ever labeled your child as explosive, strong-willed, sensitive, or angry, we have created a course that is here to support you. Our brand new anger course is now available for purchase. It's available right now. You're going to get 35 video lessons between 1 and 4 minutes long that are practical, insightful, useful, and based off of what real parents were asking us for when it comes to angry kids. It's available right now. It's brand new. We cannot wait to support you with this course. Head to the link in the show notes to grab it. You don't have a dad joke on the ready?
No, I should. I know.
Oh, what kind of dad are you?
I am very bad at dad jokes.
You need to have a sense of humor to be good at dad jokes.
So you're that hurts, Jessica.
Know. I'm sorry.
Can one of you who's listening please? Yeah, it was actually. Oh, okay.
There it is.
There it is. Okay. I was not following along with that.
Yeah.
Someone maybe can come defend me because this is my everyday life.
Welcome to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
So, Jessica, let's just get right into it, since your intro was no better than mine ever is. So we received an email, and I may butcher this name, so I apologize if I did not pronounce it correctly. Demelza, who's a listener from Australia, is looking for guidance on how to manage her 5-year-old son's use of what she calls bad language. She explains that her son, who is generally very expressive and playful with words, has started calling her dumb and stupid, telling her to shut up, and experimenting with near curse words. She notes that this sometimes happens when he's upset after she's set a limit or boundary, but other times it seems playful, likely for the shock value and attention. His 9-year-old sister also sometimes instigates it by calling him names. So while Demelza is trying to understand the unmet need behind the behavior, she admitted that it deeply bothers her, and she fears him being labeled as one of those boys when he starts school next year. So she was seeking advice on a consistent approach to let her son know this language is not okay.
Beautiful. I think so many parents have been in her shoes. I've heard this question countless times about the rude language, and then you're afraid that your child's going to be that person who's rude, and that's not who you are as parents. You're like, how is this language even coming out of my child? It's overwhelming, and I think we can make a really big deal of it. Like, it can feel like this is going to be my child forever. They're going to be this rude, mean kid. And what I really want parents to understand about this is typically, I think she's right on it, there's a shock value involved. There's a level of playfulness and creativity involved. And there's just a level of trying it out and seeing what happens, right? Kids are naturally really curious. And now I know these words are things I shouldn't really say. So what happens?
It gets a reaction.
What happens when I say it? And then on the flip side, I think when the kids are angry and saying these words, they're really trying to just show you how mad they are, right? So there is all sorts of reasons why kids say these types of words. And as always, we just want to be curious about how it's serving your specific child, right? But I don't get too worried about it as a therapist. When I hear a parent like this talking and is concerned about her child, I don't think, oh man, your kid's going to be rude forever, you know?
Yeah.
I think your kid's trying it out, trying to see what kind of reactions they can get. And there's some very simple things that we can do to help them not use this rude language long term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, her son is quite young too. Yeah. And based on the research that I was finding on rude language or swearing, it's considered to be developmental exploration. Mm-hmm. So at a certain age, kids start learning more words and they make up words. They try and see which words get the shock value. But then a lot of parents report children who seem to deliberately escalate their language to hurt others when they're angry, which I think is, again, they're kind of exploring what reactions they get, or they're feeling this feeling and they know that this is something that people don't really like. So they're just kind of using that.
And I think even a little deeper, it's like if your child is screaming like the F word at you or something, right? That gets your attention right away.
Yeah.
and it signals to you just how mad they are. So I do find that sometimes kids who feel like they're not being heard, maybe we're kind of ignoring them, like they're escalating, but they're not really feeling like they've got their parents to like truly understand how mad they are. And then they drop an F-bomb or they say something just wild, like, I want you to die. Well, we have to respond to that, right? Then our kid knows that we know how mad they are. So sometimes it's as simple as validating your child's feelings and getting on their level and talking to them before they escalate to that point. I have had a lot of success with parents just simply starting to notice this pattern of escalation and teaching parents that kids don't just start off with the F-bomb or saying that I want my mom to die, right? Like usually there's little bids for your attention that are happening along the way. And if we can address it earlier, then we don't even get to that point. So I think that that's helpful for parents too, to try and notice the pattern in their child and know that usually it doesn't just start there. That's when it's associated with anger.
Okay, I see. Yeah, but I mean, still, they're going to feel that anger regardless, aren't they? And they might use that word just because, again, their impulse control, they don't have much of it. So they know that this is what gets a rise out of someone and really shows. So is it even realistic to say that you can stop it from happening?
I mean, two things. Sometimes you're just going to have that angry outburst, and maybe that's just the words that your kid is using, and you have to teach them new ways to be angry, right? I share this quote, and it's something like, stop teaching kids to not be angry and start teaching them how to be angry, right? And so your child, the only way they might know how to be angry, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, where did they learn this, right? Is maybe through yelling and swearing. That's how they know how to be angry. So we have to teach them new ways. But I do think that if you can start to notice the pattern of escalation in your child, you can actually address the anger before it gets to that point. Because almost every child has signs. We just often miss them, or we ignore them, or we think it'll just go away, right? So like pacing, fidgeting, getting up and down, starting to get antsy. Now they're like starting to kind of be defiant. They don't want to do what you're saying, you know, all these little things. But if we ignore them, we don't be like, hey, let's go for a walk. Like, you know, let's just move our bodies and get outside for a minute instead of sitting in this situation where they're getting really angry. If we don't get them out of it, we don't get them moving in a different way, we don't validate how they're feeling, we get to the explosion. But I do think it's possible to help them with anger without them getting to that explosion every time.
Okay. I feel like you are thinking about this almost too logically. Like I think that was in our last episode, we kind of debated. I was being a little bit too logical that time. I think in this case, you might be as well.
I'm being too logical.
I just feel like kids, especially when they're younger, like maybe our 8-year-old might not do it now, but I don't know. I could foresee a 5-year-old still doing it, even if we're doing all the things that you're saying.
Yeah. Sometimes a meltdown will just happen. Yeah. I agree with you there. I agree with you. I think we can notice the signs, and sometimes you can notice all the signs, but it's too late.
Yeah.
Like their brain is already going into meltdown mode, and this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
I agree with you there.
Do you think there's ever, like, is there an age where swearing, being rude to others, is there a concerning age where it continues?
I think, is it impacting their life and their ability to make friends and their ability to be in relationships with other people and their ability to cope with their emotions, right? Like, I am concerned about that. Like, I'm not that concerned about a 3-year-old having a major tantrum.
Yeah.
Right?
No, right. Well, I think about, not that Demelza's 9-year-old is doing that, but she said she was instigating it. But let's say in a different scenario, our 8-year-old is doing those things. And maybe not even to kids at school. So they get along with kids at school, no problem. But as soon as they get home, they act out like that. I could foresee that being a possibility.
Totally, very common.
I don't know, is being rude and swearing and all that more concerning when it's that age?
I would say yes. Like, the older your child gets, right? And kind of the behavior that we allow space for in the home, especially if it's hurting siblings, right? I think sometimes we're like, oh, well, they only do it at home to their siblings. But sibling relationships have a long-term impact on a human being, right? So I think if your child is 9 or 10 and they're swearing and yelling and hurting their siblings when they're angry, then that would be something I would want to look into and try and understand what's going on here and how can I teach them how to be angry in healthier ways.
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is it's more concerning in any situation, no matter the age, if it starts affecting their ability to regulate their own emotions as they get older, especially.
Yeah.
But create relationships or be kind, let's say, to siblings or family members, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because, okay, let's say a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old even.
Yep.
I think when one of our kids was 4, she would say what the heck all the time. And I think she would just say stupid, that's stupid, and stuff like that, right? She's trying it out. Okay, I've heard my mom say what the heck, and now I'm saying it about everything, and it's little, like it's totally not the end of the world.
It didn't help that I would chuckle every time.
Well, we would laugh a little bit, and when one of them started saying stupid, and we would laugh because just coming out of their cute little mouth, like that's a funny thing. But now we're reinforcing it, and now they're saying it all the time, right? And so the only way to really help them kind of stop saying these things, because we do want to help them develop social skills and help them understand what's actually acceptable to say to other people, that kind of thing, right? We had to be like, maybe we can't say stupid all the time, right? And then when they would say stupid, we'd be like, just try and keep it really boring, really neutral, not give it a lot of attention, and stop reinforcing it by giggling and laughing when they said it. Okay, over time, they have stopped saying it because they realize that they've tried it out, doesn't get a big reaction anymore, and it's just not the way that we talk in our family, right? So you and I also have to be mindful of our language around the kids if we don't want them talking in this way.
That is challenging for me.
Yes, which
even
is hard.
On this podcast, I sometimes let it slip.
Scott has a bit more language than I do, and
I
that's
like to fucking
okay.
swear.
And I mean, and people will say that too, like, is it so wrong if my kids swear in my house? Like, that's up to you and your family and what you care about, right? Like, some parents really just don't care if their kids swear as long as they're not being hurtful to other people, right? And other parents just really don't like that. And so that to me is a family value thing. If your kid's not hurting anyone with their swearing, right?
Right. I mean, that's at home, but then
at home, yeah.
Is it possible for children to differentiate between being home and at school or something, or like on the playground, or let's say we go to karate?
Not really at the young ages, right? Yeah. So you just have to kind of know the way you talk around your kids is how they're going to talk to others. Yeah. And so make sure that you're okay with that, right? To me, that's different. Like your kid, they accidentally go, oh shit, or something like that, because they've heard you say it a million times. That's very different than intentionally saying hurtful, mean, or rude language to someone in order to get that person's reaction or to make that person feel a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's almost 3 categories here. Like, the one category is the way you swear, or I occasionally swear. I don't swear very much.
I wouldn't even be able to count on one hand the number of times I've heard you.
I guess swearing is, we're going to talk about like dropping an F-bomb, but like, I don't know, I say shit a lot, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
some
because
people
we grew
would
up
consider that swearing.
Yeah. Because we grew up in the country, that's not a swear word to me.
Yeah, that's not a swear word to people from where we live. Anyway, so there's that, just dropping like little swear words kind of in context at home. Then there's, I'm really angry and I'm using really intense language to let you know how mad I am. And then there's, I'm being rude and I'm looking for a reaction from people. Either I'm looking to be hurtful, I'm looking for them to give me a big reaction, I'm looking for them to get angry at me. So I feel like there's 3 kind of paths. And we, first of all, need to identify where a child falls. If they're just using language kind of in their day-to-day life, they're just modeling what they see you do and they're just trying it on. The words are new, they're interesting. If they're really angry, okay, they need you to know how angry they are. So then we're going to focus more on identifying that feeling underneath the word than getting so caught up in like, you can't say that, and fueling the anger. But if they're truly intentionally trying to be rude and hurt someone, that's probably where I'd actually be the most concerned of the 3.
Okay. Well, okay, so if we go back to this situation where we have a 4-year-old who says, I hate you, or you're dumb, or you're stupid, or something like that. Is that something that, as a parent, you should be responding to versus some of the other things you kind of just ignore? Or, like, how would you handle... I mean, I know you don't love being prescriptive and saying you have to do this always, you have to do that. But I think it would be helpful to know, is there a general rule of thumb for when, as a parent, I respond to the girls?
Yeah, so let's get curious. So first off, I'd be asking this parent, if they're sitting in front of me, when is this happening?
Okay.
Are they dysregulated? Are they just calmly walking up to you and saying, I hate you? Is it when they've had attention from you, or is it when they've been alone for a long period of time? How are you responding when they do this? So I kind of would need more information in order to know this is how you should respond, right?
I see. So it's mostly if they've been rude or they've used rude language, you're mostly concerned about what happened prior to that event. and try and figure out, okay, get curious about what was it exactly that led them to the point where they wanted to say that.
Yeah, so imagine in your child that all the behavior, even the words that they're using, is a form of communication with you. So to me, a child saying, I hate you is a form of communication, right? And so what are they really trying to say? They might be trying to say, I'm really mad at you right now, right? And in which case I'd be like, oof, those are big words. I hear you. You're really mad at me right now. And I love you and I'm here for you and we're going to work it out. I would support them with the anger. And then later when they're calm, totally not in that situation at all, I'd be like, hey, you've been saying I hate you. Those are hurtful words. You know, I know you don't hate mom. I know you don't hate me. So let's try and think of some different words you can say to tell me how mad you are.
Yeah.
That's what I would do over and over with a child who's saying I hate you when they're angry.
Yeah.
Now, if you're just like breastfeeding your baby, let's say, and everyone's calm and your 4-year-old calmly walks up to you and says, I hate you.
Or I hate the baby.
Or I hate the baby. Okay, well, now we're dealing with something different.
Yep.
What's going on? Are they trying to push you away? Are they feeling some separation between you and them? And often I hate you in that context means I need you.
Yeah. I love you and I need you, but you're not giving me attention. So,
Yes.
okay.
So therefore I hate you.
Yeah.
And again, it's your child's way of trying to communicate. I actually need you to know how much I don't hate you and I need you, but I'm just wondering if I say this, will you just pull away from me?
Yeah.
So in that situation, I would say to my child, I love you so much. There's nothing you could ever say to me that would change that, and see how they respond to that. And so I think in our responses, we often get so caught up in the words that we miss the meaning, like the deeper meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. And then that's where we get into conflict with our kids because we focus so much on, why would you say you hate mommy? Or you can't say that, that's mean, go sit in timeout. Well, now let's say it's a situation.
Meanwhile, that's giving them a bunch of attention, which is what they're craving anyway.
Yeah, it's giving them a bunch of attention, which is what they're craving. And now they know, when I say I hate you, it's a surefire way to get my mom's connection.
I see. I think that makes sense. What I was also finding in the research was that verbal aggression, so when a child is angry, actually it represents a developmental progress or milestone from physical aggression. So when kids are really little, they hit.
It's all their body. Yeah.
Yeah. They throw a toy or something like that. But I was finding it's actually a developmental milestone for them to use verbal aggression instead of physical aggression. So at, let's say 4 or 5 years old, this is actually something, from what I'm understanding at least, that you should almost be like kind of proud of, that they've made it to that step. Not that you want them to continue doing that, but, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they're at the point where you can actually start teaching them the words that they can use to represent the feelings that they have without using rude language. But it's kind of like the beginning stages of that. So not necessarily starting to say that, but that's the point at which it may start to click for them.
Yeah, I think that is so important to know. It reminds me of lying. We did an episode on lying, but it's like lying is a developmental milestone. Verbal aggression, rudeness is a developmental milestone as well. So it's like, congratulations, your child's hit a new developmental milestone. So let's not freak out about it, but
It's a little bit like, I realize that in theory that makes sense, but that's not something I've ever put
2 and 2 together.
I've never put that together. Like, oh yeah, this actually makes sense that they would be transitioning from this to now like hitting and throwing things to now they might start throwing and hitting things less and now start using their words more to do the same kind of thing.
Well, I actually noticed this recently in our 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And so sometimes with that girl, like she used to be very physical in her aggression, but she hasn't really hit or done anything like that in a while. But the other day, she wanted me to buy her this pair of shoes, and I wasn't about to do that because we weren't at the store for shoes, which I told her. And they were way too small. It was just like so many things. Like,
yeah, they were like 3 sizes too small.
She was like,
they were pretty though.
Yeah, her brain was just absolutely stuck on, I need to buy this sparkly pair of shoes that's 3 sizes too small, but my feet squeezed into them. It was like an evil stepsister on Cinderella. Anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hun, we're at the store for food, returning one thing, and we're going home. That's our plan. The plan is not to buy shoes today. And she lays on the floor and goes, well, if you don't buy me these shoes, then I'm never coming back shopping with you ever again. You're the worst mommy in the whole world. What kind of mommy doesn't buy her kids shoes? And there's a million people listening, right? She's got a million shoes at home. She gets hand-me-downs from her older cousin, and there's shoes everywhere. Yeah. Anyway, so I just I'm keeping my boundary. No, we're not buying shoes today. And I understand that that makes you upset. You're really angry. I'm not the worst mom. And we're going to keep going. We're going to go home. Let's have a nice rest of our trip. I'm never going to the grocery store with you ever again. And she started using her words instead of hitting me, which she used to do.
Yeah, she used to do that all the time.
She used to just hit me. But now her body is calm, but she's using her words against me. And I actually, in my own head, celebrated it a little bit. And I was like, an onlooker might see this child as manipulative. I am seeing this child as trying out, what can I say to get someone to do what I want them to do in this situation? How closely will my mom hold this boundary? Like, can I trust that she's going to hold this boundary? Can I trust in her leadership right now? And the ability to be able to think, if I say this, it would impact someone in this way, and it would make them feel guilt. And that guilt would make them want to buy these shoes for me. That is so many thought processes going on at the same time, right? There's a lot of mixed feelings going on there.
Yeah, they've developed enough of their brain to then be able to start building those connections, which is pretty, I don't know, I think it's pretty neat, actually, with her especially, because she was more physical than our oldest.
Yeah. And I think as parents, we immediately were like, oh, our child's manipulative, they're bad, they're lying to me. I think we have to see it's like, okay, this is a new skill they're trying on, right? And the question is my child bad and manipulative? The question is, how can I teach my child now to use this new skill in a way that's going to serve them and is actually healthy versus using it to manipulate people? But she has to try it out first and see where the boundary is, right? So in this situation, the best thing I could do was hold my boundary, which was, I'm not buying these shoes. And then take her out of the store. She was really mad at me.
I remember.
Yeah. And our older daughter's just staring at us like, holy, okay, this is so embarrassing. She was very embarrassed by the whole thing.
She?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even know that, actually.
She just like has a side eye and like, scoots away. She's like, not with
my
me.
sister.
Not with me. And anyway, we get in the van and, I just usually in a situation like that, I'm holding my boundary. We get in the van. I'll put on some calming music. And then usually always like a couple minutes later, she'll be like, I guess you're not like the worst mom. I'd probably go back to the grocery store with you. And then I'll be like, okay, I think now we're ready to talk. And then I coach her through, this is what you were feeling. Do I have that right? Okay, this is what you said to me. Now, can you see how that doesn't work for mom? What could we say next time? And what could we do different next time? And it is that coaching process after that's going to help her brain learn how to navigate those difficult situations. And I think we forget about the coaching process again with the rude language. Like we just get so caught up in how do I punish them? Or what kind of consequence should they have for being rude to me in the store?
Or just, I think even more simply, I think parents just want to stop it.
Yeah, we just want to stop it.
So it's not even thinking like punishing or whatever, any of that stuff. I just think a lot of parents literally just want to stop the language or stop the hurtful things their kids are saying, which makes sense to me.
None of us want to raise a manipulative, hurtful child.
I think, again, you're a great example. You've been teaching me about the developmental stages. I think this is something that, again, even something as simple as going from physical aggression to verbal aggression being a developmental milestone or like a process that they develop, I don't think that's common knowledge. Like, it makes sense. It makes a ton of sense, but I don't think it's common knowledge enough that parents would, I don't know, it's basically through things like this or you on Instagram teaching about it. I don't know how
else would we know this, right? And then we have our own fears. Like I was talking to someone literally yesterday who's like, is my kid going to be the bad, rude kid forever? Because we have our own fears that come into it. Especially, I think I don't want to be stereotypical, but I feel like a lot of dads and their sons, like they don't want their sons, they're fearful, or even moms and their sons, that they're going to be these mean boys, right? They don't want to be the ones raising the boys who end up being mean or hurtful, right? Then they get really scared. And I think out of our own fear sometimes, then we're like, we have to shut this down. And we can't see it for what it really is. And we almost see our little 5-year-old children and we imagine that they're going to be exactly this way at 15. And that's really scary and overwhelming. And I think it causes us to really react.
Yeah.
Right? And that reaction, the attention we give it can actually fuel it more. So I think we just get really stuck.
Yeah. That's kind of like, when you're learning to drive for the first time or you're learning to ride a motorcycle or something like that, you're supposed to look where you want to go. And you have to look where you want to go if you're trying to avoid something too. You don't look at the thing you're trying to avoid because you're more likely to actually hit the thing that you are trying to avoid. So I've used that a lot in my mind for a lot of different things. I remember learning that when we were in driver's ed and thinking like this can apply to a lot of things in life. If you focus so much time and attention on the thing that you don't like, it is likely to amplify that thing. You're likely to steer right into the thing you don't like and potentially make it worse.
I feel like that's actually such a beautiful metaphor for discipline in general. I think so often, like the rudeness is a great example. Like we're like, I don't want my kids to be rude. They're mean. And then we start labeling them, right? Like, oh, you're a meanie. You're being mean. You're being rude. So much so that they're like, oh, I guess that's my identity. I guess that's who I am. I'm the mean kid in the family. And a lot of families, if you look at family structures, like you see the black sheep, in the family, there's the one kid who just ends up being the one who swears more or who's mean or aggressive or rude. And you find out that often they got that label really early on.
Yeah.
And we want to be so mindful of that. Like with our kids, and I coach parents with this too, you want to be mindful of the labels you give them. So when our child is saying something manipulative, like she was in that grocery store, I'm not saying you're being manipulative. I'm saying you're a good kid and I know you love me. So I'm speaking what's true, right? I know you love me. I know you're going to go grocery shopping with me again, for sure. You love grocery shopping with me. And you had a really hard time in the store today. Your brain got super stuck. So let's talk about it.
You're like their external mantra generator or something.
Yeah, because I know that the words I speak over them become the thoughts they have about themselves. So if I come into that exact same scenario and I say, you were being manipulative and mean and rude in the store today. You're being mean. You're a meanie. And I don't want you to be like that. Like, how does that help her internal narrative of who she is if she hears that repeatedly, right? So instead, I would speak the truth that you want your children to believe about themselves over them, right? You're a good kid. You're having a hard time today. Your brain got stuck. I use that language a lot when the kids get mad because you see it in their eyes, right?
Yeah.
My brain's stuck.
And then it's funny how the older two now can verbalize those things for themselves too. I think that's quite funny and cute.
Yeah. My brain's so stuck on the shoes, Mom.
I'm so thankful they don't have my internal brain.
What's your internal brain?
I'm not allowed to make mistakes. You want to go deeper on that? I think what you're saying, though, is very much, it can be applied to more than just rude language.
Yeah. It applies in just the way we view our children. And our children feel that. If they know that their parents view them as good human beings who sometimes make mistakes, but mostly have really good intentions and who love you and love their siblings and love other people, that will become what they believe about themselves. I always laugh a little bit because it's like, I mean, we don't do Santa. We've done a whole episode on that. But if you can get your kids to believe in something like Santa Claus, right? Like a lot of kids just fully believe that this man in a red suit comes down their chimney and brings them presents every year. And you can get your kids to believe in like the Easter Bunny and all these things. Think about how like wild and far-fetched those things are. So you have the power to make them believe that. Imagine the power that you have over what they could believe about themselves.
Yeah.
And how much they trust you. Like if they trust you so much that they trust that when you say a big fat man in a red suit comes down the chimney and brings you presents and they're like, okay, mommy, if you say that's true, like I believe you, then how impactful can your words be when you say, you're a good kid and you love other people and you love me and you just were having a hard time today and you don't want to talk like that. Like, I just think it's really profound. And so we want to use their trust in us for good and for truth and for, saying loving things.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Friends, we have exciting news. The Anger course is now available. This course was created for parents of kids who would be labeled as angry, strong-willed, sensitive, or explosive. It's meant for kids ages 3 to 9 years old. Inside the course, you're going to find 35 video lessons, all between 1 and 4 minutes long, really easy to digest, covering everything from your triggers, how you view anger, of course, your childhood experiences, to what anger is and why it presents responds the way it does and how even sensitivity plays into it. And then you'll finish it off with some scenarios and really practical tools. The whole thing's only an hour and a half long because we know you're busy. We can't wait to support you. Head to the link in the show notes to grab the Anchor course right now.
When it comes to sibling influence on language, I think that's a big one. Because, I mean, older kids, I mean, our oldest maybe wouldn't appreciate it so much. She doesn't love even when we say, oh, shit, when we, like, hurt ourselves or something. But I could just foresee that happening, maybe between the middle and youngest. I don't know.
Totally.
But articles suggest addressing the older child without shaming. But how would you handle a situation where, let's say, our 5-year-old is systematically teaching our 3-year-old to swear or use cruel language? Do any situations require a bit stronger intervention, like realistically speaking?
Yeah, I mean, you probably want to start with pulling them aside. Yeah, I'm picturing this probably would more so happen with, like, let's say you have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, right? And the 9-year-old's picked up all this language at school and now they're saying it at home.
Yeah, maybe 5 and 3
right?
is not realistic.
But yes. So I would probably start just with having a conversation, right? Pouring back into the relationship with the 9-year-old and saying, hey, I know you hear this at school and you kind of talk like this at school, and we can talk about how appropriate that is. But also your little brother is 5 and it's not appropriate for you to be talking to him in that way. He's still really little and we just need to be mindful of the way we talk around him. Like, I think it's okay to have that kind of conversation. And then even as a parent, if you start to notice that your older kid's teaching the younger kids stuff that they really shouldn't know, I would just intervene and be like, okay, hey, why don't we go for a walk? Like, you and the 9-year-old, like, let's go upstairs to your room or something like that. And let's have a quick chat. And then it's a reminder, right? But I think we need to remember that parental intervention there is still important. You can't really expect even a 9-year-old, because, like, I think at the 9-year-old stage, you're still curious, right? Like, you're trying to figure out what you think about these things. And you might want to process it with your brother who you love, but you kind of forget that he's 5.
Yeah.
I think about my brother, we probably taught him like so many things because I'm the oldest, right? And I remember my friends and I, like, he would just be sitting there listening to everything that we said, right? Like, he probably heard lots of things just because we were older and he was around. Yeah. So it's important to just be mindful of that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. What about modeling calm responses? Because we've been talking about that, how you're supposed to be the model for them. But even in situations where, let's say, your child says something hurtful, like, is it ever acceptable to have an authentic emotional response to what they've said? Like, let's say one of the girls called you a hurtful name. Isn't it a little more honest and instructive for the parent to say that hurt my feelings rather than to have therapeutic neutrality? I don't know.
I'm really on the fence about this one, to be honest. I'm kind of 2 minds. I think as soon as we start letting our kids know repeatedly that they can hurt our feelings, it almost, and I'll probably get flack for this, but almost diminishes our leadership position a little bit. To be like, I'm so fragile that you saying in the heat of the moment that you hate me makes me feel like I'm going to cry. That's, like, in my opinion, more of our own stuff that we have to work through as parents, because we know our kids don't hate us. It, like, maybe different if, like, your 15-year-old is like, Mom, I really hate you, and it's, like, so serious. But if your 5-year-old's screaming, I hate you because you won't buy them the shoes that they want, I think as parents, we need to do our own work to know that they don't hate us. They're just having a hard time right now. And I think as soon as we start making a big deal of that, like, oh, you really hurt mommy's feelings. Like, and of course, like, we're allowed to have our own authentic reactions and we talk about that with the adults in our life, like how we felt in that moment. But I think it can show kids, like, how much power they can hold over us. And I think that's maybe, like, too much responsibility for kids to have. I don't know. But on the flip side, like, I do understand sometimes having an authentic reaction can be okay. But I've seen it where it's like parents, like, a little too much tell their kids how their actions make them feel, to the point where we're saying, like, you're solely responsible for making me not get dysregulated. Whereas I would rather my kids are just like, oh, Mom's not that phased because she knows I don't actually hate her. So, like, why am I bothering saying this? Because she sees right through me. She knows that I love her. I'm just having a hard time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it does. Just wonder in reality if that's as easy.
It's totally not easy. Parents get very triggered by these words, and it makes sense, right? Because we are very fearful of our child's rejection.
Yeah.
We want our kids to love us. These words are probably some of the most triggering things that parents tell me about. And that's why I think it's really important that parents know that the majority of the time it does not mean that your child actually hates you. It means that they actually love you and they need you, and they're seeking your support and your guidance through it. And of course, sometimes you'll have just human emotional reactions. Like, I'm really not worried about occasionally your
It's
emotional.
more if it's like continual and repeated that you're...
Yeah. So imagine like every single time my daughter says, "You're the baddest mommy in the world." I'm like, "I am?" Like,
Right.
You really think that? Like, oh, that really hurts my feelings when you say that.
Yeah, right.
Right? Then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, mom can't handle this meltdown. Okay. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But if like,
Yeah, I can see that. That's a little less, that's not as healthy, especially because you know that they're little. They don't really mean that. They're just using words that they know are going to get attention and kind of dig a little bit.
yeah, it's like, so now, like, that is something our 5-year-old will say to me, "You're the baddest mommy." She said that because I said, "It's time for bed." And she's like, "You're the baddest mommy in the world." So in one situation, I could be like, "Oh, you really think that, hun? Oh, that makes me so sad." And in another situation, I'd be like, "I'm not the baddest mom. I'm trying to help you go to bed. That's what good moms do. Okay, let's go to bed." And then we just don't make it a big deal, and she learns I can handle it. So yeah, always nuance, but.
Yeah, I think some parents might struggle with that a bit. I feel like the two of us, for the most part, what our kids say doesn't really affect us too much.
Yeah. Now, I guess it's different if your child's like genuinely coming to you being like, "I don't think you're a very good mommy."
Yeah. Right.
Like, then you don't ignore it. Like, they're actually telling you something.
Yeah, but I
don't
have a hard time seeing how a 4 or 5-year-old, whatever, able to think
that
deeply enough.
Yeah.
But
you can take that serious, like, and ask yourself if there's any truth to it. But I'd say for the most part, the littler kids, like, it's just about telling you they have a big feeling.
yeah, I mean, again, if we go back to the ultimate way to parent is to have a very close, connected relationship with them. Mm-hmm. You might pick up on that stuff anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because you're constantly trying to get curious about them. More on that, though. So the research was recommending explaining why words are hurtful to build empathy, so that at least kids know why the words are helpful. So you can explain, like, what you said, this is how I would imagine it's acceptable. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. But let's say, like, one of our daughters says, "Dad, you're stupid," or something like that. I can say, "We don't say that in our house. That's not a very nice thing to say to someone else. And let me explain why. To some people, whatever," and just go on to not necessarily about me and why it hurts my feelings or anything like that, but more just about, this is what that word you're saying actually means. Is that actually what you're hoping to mean by what you said? Because I think a lot of kids they know certain words.
Heard it, right?
Yeah, they just hear things and they know certain words are not very nice, mostly because of the reaction, not because they actually understand the underlying meaning behind it.
Totally. I think that's totally fine, especially if they're just trying it out, right? They're just like, I wonder what would happen if I called Dad stupid, right?
Yeah.
And then in a calm moment, you just explain what it means. And sometimes for kids, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Okay.
So how do we teach, though, the impact of the words that we're using and what their meaning is without potentially inadvertently providing a roadmap for emotional targeting? Right? Because I think
it's so
we've
true.
heard it before that some parents are like, "My kid is like a narcissist or something," or "My kid is a psychopath," or whatever, because they've done or said certain things.
Well, and bullies understand emotions probably more than anyone else, right? So in bullying prevention, we're often like, tell the bully that they're hurting your feelings and walk away. It's like, a bully fully knows that they're hurting your feelings. That's why they're saying it. Like, you don't need to tell them. That just makes it worse. But I think for the most part, within the structure of a connected, healthy parent-child relationship, explaining these things is not going to make your child a narcissist, right? Or a sociopath, right? So again,
and this is not necessarily what I think. I know that you've been asked that question before.
So it's first about the foundation. Like, do you have that relationship foundation, right? And that's the most important thing. If we have that, then our child isn't looking for these emotional reactions from other people, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. And I think through that connected relationship, then you can have these discussions with your children and they will probably be received pretty well. And kids actually do need to know what certain words mean, right? If they don't know, then they're going to just keep trying it out to see what happens when I say these words and why do people give me funny looks and why do they get a big reaction, right?
Yeah.
But if they know, okay, well, now they have the info. I feel like we've missed one really important piece, and we can talk about it just briefly. I know this episode's long. I've been reading a lot of research lately on ADHD, neurodiversity, the way that the ADHD brain works. And I'm noticing a pattern in my practice of a lot of kids with ADHD engaging in rude language or like picking fights in like rude ways. And what I'm learning is that sometimes that is actually a way to kind of get that dopamine hit or that.
I was literally just thinking that as we were talking
Were you?
about this. Yeah. I was just like, as a bully, I feel like that emotional reaction is giving you that hit that you need. Mm-hmm. And it's something that a need in their brain that's not being met. And they're, by being rude or being mean to someone else and seeing that emotional reaction, it gives that like satisfying feeling. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, it's reinforcing itself a bit.
Yeah. So that's the other reason we haven't talked about that kids can be rude is it can get that dopamine hit that they're looking for or like that reaction that they're looking for. And often kids with ADHD or other neurodiversity will actually start fights. Not that they're intentionally realizing this is why, but because their brain is like, I need this. Like, I need this excitement or this interaction. And so in those kids, you can talk to them till you're blue in the face about language and how it impacts people. And that's not very nice. And you can't say that. But unless they find a new way to get that need met, they're going to up the ante. And so for those kids, you're going to see more swearing. You're going to see more rude behavior. You're going to see yelling out stupid impulsively because they're also ADHD kids are also impulsive. So you're going to see all those things come out. And I think a lot of the approaches that we discussed today might not be as effective if you're also dealing with a child who needs to get that part of their brain activated and they've learned that they can get it activated this way.
Yeah, that completely makes sense to me. Yeah, as we were talking, that was just in my head, like, as someone who now knows that I have ADHD, it makes sense that, let's say, I wasn't the bully, but I was definitely one that went to pick fights.
Yeah.
Especially in grade school. So I just find that just like realizing a little bit more about myself as we were talking.
I was working with someone recently and their kid is just a genuine, beautiful, like amazing child. And they'll pick fights in this way and they have ADHD. And so we've been talking about the ADHD brain and how it works and why picking fights or being rude or like just yelling penis out super loud in the middle of class is like very
I used to play that game all the time with my buddies.
Right? And then I was thinking about little Scott and like Scott's report cards, which I'll say, Scott would do better if he minded his own business and focused on his schoolwork.
Yeah. It was funny because it's not like any of them were that bad. Like I had pretty decent grades. Yeah. But it was just pretty much throughout. If Scott would focus on the work, he would do amazing in class.
Yeah.
But he ends up being distracted and distracting those around him constantly.
I find
that's quite funny.
Maybe we do our next episode on this, but I find the research on ADHD in kids is just like so fascinating to me, especially working with so many kids like this and knowing like you and myself and just seeing like, oh my goodness, that's why for a kid with ADHD, countless discussions on how this word is not very nice isn't doing anything, right? I just thought at the end of it all, we should talk about that because if that's your kid, then maybe there's like, we need to find different ways for them to get that need met. And that's going to be what helps you.
I think that's quite interesting. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is a good place to end this episode. Mm-hmm. I feel like we've talked a lot about this. Hopefully Demelza got something out of this. This was valuable.
This was a fun topic. I really liked it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm finding more and more as I'm looking at the research and the studies that have been done and the articles out there. I am definitely seeing the patterns in everything now. I feel like I had a very, very high level view. So I could like understood sort of at a broad level, but now I'm starting to understand a little bit more deeply. And
you have to admit, it's pretty fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
I would love to get more into the actual brain science specifically at some point. But I don't know that I will ever be able to be a good expert on this. So maybe we'll have to have someone else on to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I've been doing this for over a decade and it's just like, I just never stop being fascinated with this and wanting to talk about it. It's so interesting to me. And I love that we are able together to build these conversations, and the people listening can get excited and find this interesting too.
Yeah. Well, and actually, the more I'm learning, the more, I think I said this in one of our past, recent episodes, just understanding a bit of child development helps you understand your child and treat them so much differently than you otherwise I would. Just based on how I grew up, I think I would be raising our kids very differently if it wasn't for you explaining a lot of this to me, and now even learning a lot of the actual research behind it. It's been quite eye-opening.
Yeah. I know, eye-opening, and it makes me want everyone to have this information, because it's empowering, and it actually helps.
Honestly, it is.
It helps you see your job as a parent of how important it is, and how wise your children are, and how it's not just this old school parenting where it's the parent's the boss and the child just be seen and not heard, or doesn't know anything or whatever. It's this relationship we're building together, and it's just, I don't know, it's really beautiful. So
That's great.
Well, it's been a slice.
It's been a slice.
All right, we'll talk to you next week. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.